Hi everyone, this is Karun Chandhok, just back from the Bahrain Grand Prix. What a fantastic race we had. I think it was the third race in a row where F1 2017 has continued to deliver a really interesting battle. No question about it, the Ferrari versus Mercedes battle is going to go all the way down to the wire. But yeah, another strategic contest, lots of outside factors at play as well. So let's start from the top. I think first of all, qualifying, Valtteri Bottas getting his first pole position. I was really pleased with Valtteri. He's a really nice guy. I've known him for many years, and really happy for him to, it sort of underlined that belief that Mercedes had in him to get him into the team. Didn't quite work out on Sunday for him, but we'll come back to that. The reality is, to out-qualify Lewis Hamilton is no mean feat. So yeah, really good effort. And he talked me through his lap on Channel 4 for those of you who watched our coverage back at home, and it was a really good lap. A couple of little mistakes, really on the edge, but I think overall he should be pretty pleased with that. I know he was a bit disappointed on Sunday, but I think qualifying was a really good effort. Ferrari was a big surprise of qualifying, in my opinion. I was surprised how far back they were compared to Mercedes, and I think they would as well. It's interesting how in the first two races they were right up there, but for whatever reason, temperature, circuit related, nobody could really pinpoint it, and really we haven't got enough of a data set to draw a trend. We need to see a few more races, but also the cars are evolving, updates. Ferrari had a new front wing we saw on Friday free practice, and it's a constantly moving goalpost, and I think that's really interesting. Red Bull did a good job, I thought, in free practice and quali. They were definitely closer this weekend than they have been first couple of races. I remember, when I flew out of London on Wednesday night to get to Bahrain Thursday morning, there was a guy from Red Bull checking into the flight right next to me, and he had the porters lined up with huge boxes and boxes of bits that he was carrying out to Bahrain. So yeah, interesting to see them really pushing on as well. But Hülkenberg, I think the other star of qualifying. I'd be remiss not to mention his performance in qualifying. I think that was very good. Best of the rest. They don't seem to have it in race pace though. When you look at FP2 and also the Grand Prix, they don't seem to have the race pace to match Williams or Force India, and I think that's something they'd be working on. But really good job, Nick Chester, Alan Permain, the technical team there. They've worked with Nico, and I think Nico has given them a bit of setup direction, has given them some guidance in which way they want to head with the car to unlock its potential, and to be best of the rest on the grid, backing up his 7th place from Shanghai, I think was a very good effort in qualifying. So in the Grand Prix, Lewis obviously starting on the dirty side, hampered him, and then we had Valtteri and Seb up front. Valtteri seemed to be really struggling. Mercedes talked about the fact that his first set of tyres on the grid, they weren't able to set the right tyre pressures, and that hampered his first stint. But even beyond that first stint, he didn't seem to have the pace of Lewis or Sebastian, and that's interesting for me. Is that a clear sign that Mercedes need to start favouring Lewis when it comes to those strategy calls and decision making? And I think they're very conscious. I think Mercedes are very good and very conscious of being unbiased to one side of the garage. They've done that in the past. We saw Nico and Lewis. They tried really hard to be fair and equal, and I think now though they're in a different dynamic. They're in a different World Championship battle. They're fighting against another team, and the enemy is no longer within, the enemy is outside, and you do wonder whether they need to start rethinking their approach in terms of favouring one driver or the other. I'm sure it's a hard decision. It's very early in the season to resign one driver to a number 2 status, but maybe that's what it's going to take. We've seen, look, historically, back in '86, Nelson Piquet and Nigel Mansell were fighting each other for Williams, and was Prost who snuck into the World Championship. And there have been a few occasions where drivers are taking points off each other, and ultimately in the same team, I mean, and ultimately it allows someone else to come through. So, yeah, very tricky stuff there for Mercedes to deal with. And if you look at this race specifically, the opening part of the Grand Prix, Valtteri didn't have the pace to pull away, and you could see, in fact, all the way down to 5th with Max and Daniel as well. There were sort of 5 of them in a train. And Ferrari bit the bullet on lap 10. They went for the undercut, and you do wonder that those sort of instances, if Valtteri had the tyre pressure issue, which was really hampering him, why didn't Mercedes pull him in? Or on the flip side, why didn't they pull Lewis in and give Lewis an undercut? Perhaps I could have jumped both Sebastian and Valtteri. So, I mean, I was looking through some lap times, just replaying the race and trying to understand on the live timing data. And when Vettel pitted, Valtteri's lap on that lap was a 1:37.6, and Vettel came out 23.2 seconds behind. But then Mercedes curiously left their cars out, and over the next couple of laps, the gap came down 20.5, 18.0, and in fact, by the time the safety car came out on lap 13, Valtteri was only 16.1 ahead of Sebastian. So if there had been no safety car, Sebastian would have come out 7 seconds up the road. In effect, the safety car actually helped the Mercedes drivers close, and they actually made 7 seconds. When you look at the sector times, in the middle sector of the lap, the Mercedes guys, so let's say Valtteri did a 42.4 second middle sector, Seb did 49.1. So in that one sector alone, they gained 7 seconds, let alone the last part of the lap. So, despite the safety car, Ferrari still managed to get track position, and that was that sort of 3-lap phase and that decision making that went around that lap 10 phase of the first pit stop was really the critical moment of the Grand Prix. And I think in hindsight, Mercedes will wonder, should they have gone for a more aggressive undercut? We knew the soft tyres were hanging on. They could have, in the end they pitted 3 laps later and it was fine at the end. So, yeah, and I think that's something they need to think about going forward. And I'm sure they will. There's some extremely clever people on that Mercedes pit wall. James Vowles, great strategist, Andrew Shovlin, the chief engineer, Pete Bonington, Tony Ross, the 2 race engineers, some very, very clever people there, and I'm sure they'll work it out. But fundamentally, I believe it's a philosophical issue of, do we carry on in terms of fairness and let the driver in front have first call, etc., or do we start to favor one driver over another and use that tactic to combat Sebastian? Once again, Sebastian did what he does best. When he gets out front, he's gone. This is why the guy's won so many Grand Prix. He knows how to win races. He managed that gap to Lewis. I think Lewis did exactly what any racing driver in the world would have done when he came to backing up Daniel into the pit lane. The mistake he made perhaps was not backing Daniel up enough before the pit entry line. Daniel did an interview with us on Channel 4 where he talked about the fact that before the pit entry line you can slow down, but once you cross the pit entry line in the pit lane itself, you can't slow somebody down. And when you look at the pit stop times, I'm just looking at my other screen, Vettel's total pit stop, pit in to pit out was 24.7. Valtteri lost time, don't forget, because they had to let the traffic come past, and his was 28.3, so he lost 3.6 seconds, which in effect, because of the safety car, was actually also the difference between getting out ahead of Sebastian or not. Lewis's stop was 30.7, so that was 6 seconds total time slower than Vettel, and that shuffled him way out of the order, and then he got the 5-second penalty. But yeah, really good Grand Prix, fascinating battles up front, but once again I think further proof that Sebastian and Lewis are really staking their claim to being undisputed number ones in their team. Valtteri did very well to bounce back from China. I'll be interested to see how he goes from here. We know he's good at Russia. He was good there with Williams before, and we'll see. So I've gone on quite a bit with the battle at the front, but just a couple of the mentions. Felipe Massa, I thought, had a very good race for Williams. Lance was unfortunate. I think Carlos will, when he watches the replay, will slightly regret that maneuver. I think Hulkenberg had a tough race in terms of race pace, as I mentioned before. But Checo Perez was another star for me. Tough qualifying, got unfortunately because the yellow flags, didn't get to do his last lap, knocked out in Q1. But such a good race. Did a very good job in the first 2-3 laps, and then had good pace to go with it to rack up good points. So that was for me, he was actually probably the driver of the day, Perez. He did a really good job. So we've got a couple of weeks away before we head back to Sochi for the next round of the World Championship, and we'll see what happens. But no question about it, Ferrari versus Mercedes is going to keep going.